Thank you. Lucinda, can you read the notice of electronic meeting, and then maybe Gretchen can let folks in while you're doing that as they show up? Could you do that for me, please?
The governor has declared a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the nature of this declared emergency makes it impracticable or unsafe for the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership to assemble in a single location. This meeting will be held utilizing electronic virtual communication with the Zoom software application in accordance with virtual meeting procedures and policies as outlined in item 4.0-01 of the Virginia State Budget HB 29 as effective April 24th, 2020. The meeting will be recorded and made available to the public at www.tjpdc.org.
Thank you, Lucinda. How are we looking, folks, on quorum?
I'm showing 9.
Okay. So we're going to keep on moving along in the meeting, and we have to hit 11 for quorum, if I remember the math right. Okay, good. So next up on the topic is comments from the public. Is there any public attending the meeting today that would like to chime in and say something? Okay, now everybody jump in at once. All righty. So we're going to dance around this agenda a little bit and bring us back to the action items. And if some public chimes in, somebody can give me a little bit of note, we can kind of take it from there. So I'm going to ad-lib a little bit, and we're going to jump over to Stacy on number 5 on the agenda, the events committee update. Stacy, that's on you. Would you mind to give us a quick update on how we're doing with the events committee, and I guess some new stuff coming up?
Sure.
Thank you, Stacy.
Excuse me. So we have wrapped up the spring speaker series. We did that earlier this month. We did cover 4 topics this year or this spring, and those were zoning hurdles and incentives, affordable housing pro formas, transportation and housing, and we wrapped up with a session on equity and housing and communities. All of them were really well attended. We had an average of 57 participants in the actual sessions themselves, and then about an average of 47 additional views of the recordings afterwards. We did get some good responses back through the surveys, which we will be looking at as the committee and seeing if there are ways we can improve the sections moving forward. We've also started compiling a list of potential topics for a fall session, and we will share those with the group to get some feedback after we review everything. It's a pretty long list at the moment. We probably need to shrink that down a bit and pick some top ones. But as always, if there are any topics that any of you would like to see covered, please let us know. You can send those to Lucinda or Christine. Or even me, if you want to do that. And if you have any other feedback, had you attended any of the sessions, just to let us know how we're doing and ways to improve, that is also greatly appreciated. We have the Planning District Commission has applied for a grant to help fund a fall series. We are waiting on response to that before we start making any official plans for the fall. But we will let you know what happens as that moves forward. And are there any questions, comments anyone has about these?
Hearing none. Thank you, Stacy. For those who are just joining us, we're moving around in the agenda a little bit until we hit quorum. Sunshine and some other folks that chimed in the last minute or so. Thank you for joining us. How are we looking, Christine?
I think we have quorum. Christine, what do you think?
I think it would be prudent for us to do roll call to make sure, to confirm that we have it, because I don't want to continue with voting items unless we're certain.
I would agree with that. Which one of you would like to take on that task?
I can do that.
Thank you, Lucinda.
Anthony Harrow.
Can you guys just say here for us, please?
Present. Sorry, was muted.
Brandon Collins.
Here.
Chris Henry, he had another meeting, he can't.
Yep.
Christopher Bremen.
Here.
Colette Sheehy also had another obligation. Dan Rosenwig. Denise Bonds. Diantha McKeel. She accepted the invitation, so maybe she'll come in a little bit.
Yeah, she had a conflict at the start. I think she'll be joining us late.
Croquette Murray Key said she could come until 3. Not here yet. Greg Powell,
Here.
Jay Willer, Jeff Waite. That he's like from Walmart, and his email bounced back yesterday, so I need to, I think, do some research
Okay,
on it.
let's just keep on going, please.
Jess Rutherford, Keith Smith,
Here.
Margaret Claire is here. Michael Payne,
Here.
Roselle Booker, Ned Galloway,
Here.
Peter Holman,
Here.
Bob Babiak. Lloyd Snook is an alternate for Michael Payne, so he doesn't count today.
I'm used to that.
Sorry, Lloyd. And
Here.
Sunshine Mathone is here.
Present.
So what does that give us to account, folks?
That puts us at 10, not 11.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Is there any provision why we cannot let Lloyd vote?
We cannot let Lloyd vote because Michael Payne is voting on behalf of the city.
Understood. All righty, so we can't get to consent agenda. We cannot get to bylaws amendment. If one of you two ladies, if you wouldn't mind maybe texting somebody that's missing here, see if they can join us. I'm gonna try to text Jesse right now and see if he can join us. In the meantime, Christine, would you want to tackle the executive director update?
I would be happy to. That's
Okay.
all good news that we get to share. So I'm happy to bring that up higher in the agenda. So the Planning District Commission applied for, and I'm going to just share general housing updates that we have for the Planning District Commission. We've had a lot of grant applications and awards and pending initiatives. So I just wanted to bring everybody up to date on those. We applied for and were awarded a Virginia Eviction Reduction Pilot Planning Grant. The acronym for that is VERP, which I think is unfortunate, but it is what it is. We're going to do a planning grant that's $50,000 between now and end of October. The purpose of that is to create a regional coordinated systems approach to prevent evictions in the region. It will incorporate 3 different initiatives within that planning grant. And one of them is a needs assessment. That's really around the data collection, looking at a 3-year review of general district court data to better understand what our evictions look like in this region, to examine what the outcomes of those are, whether they had representation by council. So the first part is a needs assessment. The second part of that planning grant is developing a pilot tenant landlord outreach engagement plan. And the third part is developing cross-organizational programs and policies. So really looking at what are all of the policies and programs of all of the different agencies that touch on eviction, and seeing if we can make a better coordinated system with those policies and procedures. That planning grant then sets us up to be able to apply for an implementation grant that will be announced later in the fall, probably early winter. And those implementation planning grants in the previous round ranged anywhere from $200,000 to over $1 million. And that would be to then do the work required to create a better systems approach to eviction reduction. If anybody wants to add on to that, I would be happy for you to jump in. Otherwise, I'll jump to the next one. I know there's a lot of people involved in that. That'll require a coordinated advisory group of about 21 different members of all of the agencies that touch eviction in some way, or housing instability.
Excuse me, Christine, can I interrupt you for a moment?
Please.
Lucinda, would you mind sending Jesse Rutherford a link? He'll join us as soon as.
Okay.
I apologize, Christine.
Mhm.
That's no worries. The second thing that we've done is we applied for a $20,000 grant through Virginia Housing to cover the cost of a consultant to do a strategic plan for this regional housing partnership body. We put out an RFP at the beginning of May. We received several proposals. We reviewed those and we selected the Spark Mill. The Spark Mill is who previously worked with the Regional Housing Partnership to do the half-day strategic planning. So now all we're doing is we're awaiting award notification. As soon as we get award notification that we received that grant from Virginia Housing, we'll issue a notice to proceed to Spark Mill and get started on strategic planning this fall for the Regional Housing Partnership. Third one, Stacy mentioned, we applied through the Bama Works Fund to be able to continue our educational webinar series. The follow-up meeting that I had with the grand tour was very promising. So it will likely receive funds for that so we can continue this series into the fall, in addition to requesting sponsorships to cover the full cost of putting it on. So good stuff happening there. Two other big ones, the Home Consortium, the Home Partnership. The region has been awarded $2.4 million in home ARP funds, which is that American Recovery Plan funding. This is in addition to the annual home funds that are already received. And these ARP funds are not emergency funds. They're intended to be for recovery and rebuilding after the pandemic. And they're specifically designed to benefit homeless individuals and households, those at risk of experiencing homeless, those fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault. So it's a very targeted population. And then there's also acceptable uses of those funds, and that could be tenant-based rental assistance, preservation of affordable units, supportive services, development of non-congregate shelters. We are still awaiting guidelines. They've only put out a one-page letter of this funding, so we don't have a lot of information, but we'll certainly keep you all in the loop of what those funds will look like. We do know that those funds won't be available until late fall, early winter at the earliest, and they have to be committed and spent down by 2029. So it's actually an 8-year window for expending those funds. So that's really good news for our region. It's somewhere in the neighborhood, Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, of 3.2 times our normal annual amount of funding. Is that about accurate? Yeah. Okay. And happy to take questions on all these at the end. I only have 2 more updates. The next update is Virginia Housing has developed a new grant track program that is specifically designed to use planning district commissions as the intermediary or the administrator of the funds. We applied for the max amount, which is $2 million, and that was that funding is to develop new units. So this funding cannot be used for preservation, but to develop new affordable units in the region. Through this grant, the PDC would engage through an RFP process a development partner, and the development partner would be the one to develop the units. We would serve as the fiscal administrator. We have not yet received award notification on this funding. However, we were assured that it was a non-competitive grant, and they had enough funding for all planning district commissions that applied. And they actually received 100% participation in planning districts that applied for the funding. So we are very much looking forward to doing this. This is a new partnership with Virginia Housing. They've been incredibly supportive through the application process, and it's a 3-year grant, and the first year is designed for planning. So that's where we would figure out who the partners were going to be, what type of units would be developed, what the regional priority is. So we'll be in touch with you all about that also. We anticipate award notice on that by early July. So it will be a pretty quick turnaround to stand up that program once we hear about that. And then the final update I have for you guys is that we are currently interviewing for a new planner position. So we are looking to hire on a planner that can support our housing program and also support our transportation program. So we are hoping in the next couple of weeks to have somebody here to support all of these amazing housing initiatives that are coming our way for us to be able to do for the region. With that, I'm happy to take questions on any of those. I know that was a lot of different initiatives, but we're pretty excited here that our housing program is really developing and building out with new funding opportunities and new partnership opportunities. And I'm really looking forward to the next 1 to 8 years in these programs to see what we're able to do with it.
Any questions for Christine? Well, kudos to you, Christine, and your team. You guys are rocking and rolling. We purposely, when we set up the agenda, put your report before talking budget. So,
Here.
Looks like I got Jesse here. Jesse, can you hear us?
Gotcha, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for joining us. Now we can take some votes. We just,
Looks like, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Keith. It also looks like Ms. Marie Key is here. So we do definitely have a quorum at this point.
oh, perfect. Thank you, folks, for joining us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the beginning of the agenda, back to number 3, which is the consent agenda, since we now have a quorum. And thank you, folks, for joining and helping us get there. So we are now on the consent agenda. These are draft minutes from the March 24th meeting. Any edits or comments, and I'd be more than happy to entertain a motion.
Motion to accept the minutes.
Thank you, Greg. Can I get a second, please?
I'll second it. This is Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret. So for sake of ease here and moving it along, and we'll go ahead and just do a hand vote on this one. A little later, we will probably do a roll call vote, but on this one, all in favor say aye. Please raise your hand and say aye. Thank you.
Aye.
Looks like we got that. Thank you, folks, for doing that. All righty. So the bylaws amendment and handout, it actually calls for me, but I'm going to ask Ned to pick up the reins on this. So Ned, if you wouldn't mind beginning this a little bit, and we'll tag team on it.
Good afternoon, everyone. So when we first created the partnership, our bylaws, we of course created the executive committee. The main officer positions for the executive committee are the chair and the vice chair. We did it by a term limit type of deal where each person would be nominated and in the term for 1 year, and somebody could not be in the position for more than 2 years. Given over the past year, the executive committee agreed to keep the leadership as it is for the coming year, but not to go past the coming year. Keith was willing to continue to serve as chair. That would be me as vice chair of the partnership and the executive committee. If the full partnership agrees to do that, that would require a bylaws change. Christine has the language on this, but it would basically state that we would do this exception. We're not changing the bylaws to change the term limits. We're just taking the action to allow the leadership to stay in place for 1 more year for consistency. And then with the expectation that next year the leadership would change out, and also to have conversations as part of the strategic plan, although this isn't in the bylaw change, but the expectation that the executive committee discussed that membership of both the executive committee and the partnership would be explored to make sure we have the proper representation on both bodies. And that would obviously be driven out of the strategic plan. Christine, did I hit all the high points there?
You did for that part of the bylaws revision. Do you want me to hit on the electronic meeting portion?
Please.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the yeah, go ahead.
The second part is just that the code that we referenced in the bylaws originally for permitting attendance at meetings by electronic means, that particular code has been repealed and replaced with an updated code. So the bylaws would revise that to reference the appropriate code. And basically it not only revises the language for the code, but it dictates what is permissible for electronic meeting participation from a remote location. Meaning that once this state of emergency is lifted on the 30th, we will be required to meet again in person. And if you, for an extenuating reason, need to participate electronically, you would need to on before or the day of the meeting, notify the chair that you're unable to participate due to one of the extenuating reasons listed in the memo that's within your packet. And then a quorum would have to be present physically in order for electronic participation to be permitted. and the body would have to vote that that electronic permission participation is allowable because of the extenuating circumstance. And I think the important thing to note on that code, and I can send out the exact language if you prefer, but I did get to put a memo of the high level on that code. I think the important thing for us all to note is that electronic participation is only cannot exceed 2 or 25% of the meetings. So for the full partnership, that could still mean someone is participating in half of those quarterly meetings if there is an extenuating circumstance. For the executive committee, that would mean up to 2 meetings of the 8 that occur. So that's what the requirement states in the new code. So I put revised language, and I actually included the track changes so that you all could see that within what the bylaw revision would be. And then the final language that I had to revise, and this is just because I noticed it as I was doing revisions, is just I revised a little bit of the language preceding the signature section because it says we as the executive committee, but only the chair signs it. So I just adjusted that language to say I as chair. And again, those track changes are within the bylaws that I sent out in the packet also.
So thank you, Christine. And I apologize for any background noise. That I'm not in my office. I'm at the car office, and there's an event going on the other side of the wall here. So I apologize for any background noise. I'll try to control my mute button the best I can. Christine, we have 2 motions, right? We're tackling these in 2 separate motions, correct? Or we're going to do this in one motion? We're going to do this in one motion. Okay. So I think, Ned, would you be prepared to make that motion? And then maybe we can then open it up for discussion if you would like.
Christine, I'm going to just follow the lead here. Should be the bylaws change first, correct?
All of these would be amendments within the bylaws. So you would make a motion to approve the amendments to the bylaws as presented.
Oh, and we'll just capture all of them. So I make that motion to amend the bylaws as presented.
Thank you, Ned. Do I have a second? And then we'll open it up for discussion.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on these 2 particular items? Okay, great. I'd like to do a roll call vote on this, Lucinda, if you don't mind. So if you wouldn't mind going through all that are present. We obviously do not want to ask those who are not present to vote. So I know that's a little difficult for you to keep a track, but if you could do a roll call vote, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Anthony Harrow,
Aye.
Brandon Collins,
Aye.
Christopher Brement,
Aye.
G. Marie Key,
Aye.
Greg Powell,
Aye.
Jesse Rutherford, Jesse Rutherford,
Aye.
thank you. Keith Smith,
No, I'm saying aye.
Margaret Claire,
Aye.
Michael Payne,
Aye.
Ned Galloway,
Aye.
Peter Holman,
Aye.
Sunshine Mathone,
Aye.
and did I miss anybody? Okay.
Hearing none, it has passed. Thank you very much. So I think we tackled the bylaws amendment handout. Did I miss anything, Christine or Ned, on that? Okay, thank you. So we already did the committee's event update, so thank you, Stacy. So we're going to move to Anthony Harrow and Anthony to discuss the regional housing plan handout. And just as for those who have not had an opportunity to print out all of this, this is really cool. So I'll let you guys go ahead and make the presentation, but it's really good stuff and staff has knocked it out of the ballpark. Thank you, Anthony.
Absolutely. I agree. I think this is really excellent work and also excellent work from the committee members as well, who provided really great input. I think it was a really great partnership between the committee and staff at TJPDC working on this, and I think this is a really nice product to be able to present. We've shown parts of this to the Regional Housing Partnership over the time it's been developed, and this is the kind of culmination of it, including the last regional chapter, which talks about the, as opposed to the individual chapters for each locality, there's a regional one describing the region as a whole. And we had a lot of fruitful discussion about this at the committee level about how to tackle this regional portion. And we landed on what you see in front of you, which is basically a summation of overarching goals for the region. We felt that it was important to somehow identify what was particular to the region instead of just rehashing individual action steps that might be found in the individual chapters for each locality. What was unique for the region? And this led to some good conversations about how to track regionally these goals. And you'll notice one of the regional goals on page 13 of the housing plan is programming, which includes one of the goals is to actually develop and identify metrics for tracking the implementation of affordable housing that's laid out in this regional plan and also in the individual chapters. And so we see that as a important aspect of this, and it's led to a really good discussion that frankly we hope to continue in the strategic planning. So that's a great update from Christine that we'll have strategic planning to look forward to in the fall. I think this piece in particular, the regional section, the regional goals, is going to be an important aspect of that because this naturally led to the question of who's going to track these regional goals and who's responsible for overseeing the region. Obviously, the individual chapters pertain to the counties, but regionally, what is that entity? Is it RHP? And if so, how are we going to go about that? So I think that's going to be something to look forward to. And for now, what we've laid out are these overarching goals: policy, programming, and capital, which all of the individual chapters, the action steps, fell into those kind of categories of either a policy action step, programming action step, or a capital action step. So that's what's laid out in front of you. And I think it sums up well what's going on with the region, but also kind of lays out a map for how we can move forward to a more actionable set of goals and metrics. So I think that's about it for presenting it. Christine or Nick, please feel free to jump in, or Charisse for any other parts of it. But
Sure, I'm happy to add on just what we've done with it so far and where we're going with next steps. This is still a draft copy, to be clear. This will go in several directions before it hits its final landing point with the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission body. Right now, a draft of this has been sent out to the executive leadership, if there is a head of a community development planning department, as well as the voting membership of you all. It has been sent to everybody to kind of gather any kind of feedback that we might need to. We do recognize, in 100 and some page document, there are likely errors that we are happy to take that feedback to correct. So anything that you can give us would be helpful. We will then be asking this body to, just through consensus, it doesn't require anything formal, but through consensus, move this up to the Planning District Commission. In the meantime, between this meeting and when it would go before the Planning District Commission, we will be working with individual jurisdictions to get their feedback to present as they direct us to, of what their jurisdiction needs, whether they want us to come before their governing body, go before their planning staff, but we'll be working individually with each jurisdiction to make sure that we are getting their feedback on that. So also happy to take questions.
Christine, I just would like to be clear. My agenda shows this as an action item, and I want to be clear, we're not taking action on this today, correct?
If I misspoke, I think what you decided is you did want a vote of this body to move it to the commission. So I apologize if I said
I just wanted to make sure
No, you're right.
I understood.
My fault.
No worries. So that being said, this is an action item. So what I would like to do is to see if we can get a first and a second as we did with the previous, and then I'll open it up for any discussions or further questions for staff, and then we could either take a vote or not. But so that being said, I would love to entertain a motion to adopt it as presented.
I'll go ahead and make that motion.
Second?
Thank you, Anthony and Ed. So I'd like to open it up for discussions or further questions for staff before we take action. Any questions? Any
Yes,
comments?
this is G. I just have a particular question. And the option to present to the local governing body or the planning commission of that local governing body, is that an option to do either two separate to one jurisdiction, or to basically bring them all to one meeting and present to that particular area what we have gathered to this point? Because right now what I'm hearing from individuals in the community, I think that the team did an excellent job. I'm just hearing some different things from different people in the community, and just wanted to know what would that look like, that presentation piece.
Christine, would you like to tackle that, please?
Sure,
Thank you,
G, I'm happy to take that. I actually sent within the email that I sent to your executive leadership, I'm asking for their direction on how they would like this presented within your jurisdiction. So we're definitely flexible on our end for what it is that each jurisdiction would like for us to do. I would think it would be okay for us to do two separate presentations if the two bodies can't come together for that to be one.
Thank you.
Any other further questions or discussion on this matter for staff or thoughts?
I had one question. As I look at the recommendations that are included jurisdiction by jurisdiction, I recognize the ones from Charlottesville. Those are basically straight out of our affordable housing plan. Is there a similar planning document behind the recommendations for the other jurisdictions, or is that the authors of this study coming up with their best recommendations, or what's the origin of those recommendations?
So I'll start, and Christine, you can back up. The strategy committee had representation from folks from this committee, and also from without this body, from the nonprofit sector, from just community members as well, to provide input about best ways that they felt to reach those goals, or to shore up the gaps in the regional housing study that was done. So that was the main source of those suggestions, paired with the outreach to the individual counties, knowing what was kind of important for each individual location or locale. And so that's what brought those basically to what you see in front of you. But Christine, please feel free to jump in.
I'm happy to add on to that as well. Early in the process, so late 2019, early 2020, we also did a stakeholder meeting and a public meeting in each of the 6 jurisdictions. We did a region-wide survey to collect information. We worked very closely with both the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, because they were already considering their own affordable housing plan. That's why you're going to see a lot of overlap there. And then have been in different conversations with local staff throughout the process with creating the other ones. But as Anthony said, it was best practice and committee driven to identify those strategies.
So is it merely coincidence that virtually all, I say virtually because I haven't checked word for word every one of them, that virtually all of the recommendations that you have made for Charlottesville are already agreed upon coming out of the affordable housing plan?
It is not coincidence. That is completely intentional, to not have a document that is conflicting with or competing with the city's affordable housing plan as approved. So we wanted to make sure, originally, if I can back us up a little bit, originally the city of Charlottesville wasn't going to be included in the regional plan because at the time, 2 years ago, we assumed that the city would already be completed with their process by the time the regional one kicked off. But through discussions, we said there's a real opportunity here to make sure that the city is a part of this regional plan and that we dovetail everything that they're doing with their consultant in with this regional plan. So as you can see, it is not at all coincidence. It is intentional.
So for the other jurisdictions, for Flavanna, Greene, Nelson, and so on, we don't know from this document at least whether the boards of supervisors agree or disagree.
That's
We
correct.
do not from this document, correct?
Okay, thanks.
But it isn't in a vacuum. I mean, this has been developed with, outreach in those localities. But it's not the same kind of, those localities have not gone through the same process that the city and the county have.
Sure, understood. Okay.
Any other further questions on reference to the regional housing plan? Lloyd, did that wrap up your question, sir?
Yeah, I was curious in particular about one thing. I noticed you have put in there the city's previously announced goal of spending $10 million a year on affordable housing. I didn't notice a similar statement from other jurisdictions that we think this county or that county should put in X number of dollars to affordable housing. Maybe I missed something, but it just seemed to me that that's the kind of thing that, because in Charlottesville we have an awful lot of very vocal advocates for affordable housing, that has been front and center in every discussion we've been having on affordable housing for at least the last 3 or 4 years. Just wondering if there are comparable lobbyists for affordable housing in some of the outlying jurisdictions.
I'm not sure I can answer that. Sorry, Lloyd.
Okay,
I
thank you.
would only add to that, per capita numbers are great.
What?
I would only add per capita numbers for that are great.
I think that in particular is representative of all the work that's been done with the city's own housing plan and goals that has not had the equivalent in the other localities, and something like that specific, I feel like needs to go through that kind of same process. So hopefully that will come out of these suggestions, basically the suggestion plan, to put much more specifics to it. But yeah, it's needed, I would say.
Thanks.
For sure.
Well, if I may add, I think from a county perspective, one of the other counties that's not Albemarle, from what I hear and what I was trying to allude to earlier, I'm hearing that people are afraid about affordable housing, particularly in rural communities. I mean, I just have to be upfront and frank about it. And some of the reasonings behind that are astounding. I won't necessarily share those thoughts in this meeting, or what some of the things that were shared to me. But from the rural aspect, it just seems that people are afraid of what affordable housing may be, and looking at the cost of what that may look like. And the localities already have funds allocated for elsewhere, and because we don't actually have a finite number or dollar figure of what affordable housing is, that becomes another strain. So that was the reason why I asked the question I asked earlier. And I think information is power, and being able to communicate that information, not just to our governing bodies or our planning commissions, such as, I'm a planning commissioner, but some of the other commissioners are not necessarily as involved in affordable housing as I am. So the community at large, right, needs to be a part of that. And I think this group and our committees have worked very hard to make that happen. I just don't know if the leap has been made necessarily into the rural areas as we would like it to be. So the support from the governing bodies, it's not necessarily that people don't believe everybody should have a place to live, but there's that thing, not in my backyard, not my next door neighbor, and that's kind of where we are right now. So I think that's going to be one of those other leaps and jumps that we have to get past. But that's just what I've been seeing and what I've been hearing from constituents in my area.
Thank you, G.
Thank you, G.
Lloyd, did that wrap up your questions and comments, sir?
Yep, we're good. Thank you.
So Matt Lawless and other folks that are on here that are the public, we have a second portion of public comments at the back end. So please take a note. We will ask you to chime in at the back end. So I apologize, but this is not the appropriate time to do that. So thank you, Matt, for chiming in on that question. So we have a first and a second on the floor. We're in the discussion portion of this. And any other comments or thoughts on the regional housing? And again, I apologize for the background noise. I'll try to minimize that the best I can. But any other comments or thoughts on this before I call for the vote?
I'd like to just say again, and I've said to staff before, that this is an extraordinary piece of work. I really appreciate it. I think every effort was made to engage with every jurisdiction. The city and Albemarle County had active participation of staff. I think that the formatting is superb. The content seems very meaningful, and I think it's a wonderful document on which we can build next steps for the organization. So thank you, staff.
Thank you, Greg. Diantha said that you were aware we're up to item number 6, and we're going through the plan. It was presented, and we're in a motion status at the moment of the first and second. So do you have any thoughts or questions to add before I call for the vote?
No, I just want to apologize for jumping in late. I
No.
really had something I had to attend, and I apologize for that.
Well, I've got loud people behind me, and you've got birds chirping. I prefer your birds over my loud people. But I just wanted to add, some meetings ago, I asked what was the value proposition for our organization. And this is about as prime example for what we do and what we do well and what I think this body is uniquely designed to do. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for staff. And it's got a little bit more work, but I think the formal portion here is we need to get it approved from this body so we can go before the commission for a formal vote at that point. So if I don't hear any other comments or thoughts on it, I'm going to call the vote. We're going to do a roll call vote again. Lucinda, if you wouldn't mind, please. And if you can do the vote, I'd appreciate it.
Anthony Harrow,
Aye.
Brandon Collins,
Aye.
Christopher Bremmett,
Aye.
Diantha McKeel,
Aye.
G. Murray Key,
Aye.
Greg Powell,
Aye.
Jesse Rutherford,
Aye.
Keith Smith,
Aye.
Margaret Clare,
Aye.
Michael Payne,
Aye.
Ned Galloway,
Yes.
Peter Holman,
Aye.
Sunshine Mathone.
Aye.
Thank you all. It passes unanimously. Thank you for all your efforts, staff, for all the work that you've done. I know Christine's doing the clap hands, but this was a lot of work. So thank you so much. So this segues into the fun subject of money and budget. So after I just did my speech, how this is a great tool. We are now at the point that we need to have the serious conversation about adopting a new budget and asking partners to contribute in this process. So to recap it a little bit, the commission has dedicated $25,000 to this budget. So we currently have a standing $25,000 budget. Frankly, that actually accomplishes not too much other than these kind of meetings. There's not enough staff time to accomplish all the awesome stuff that we've done before. And UVA has, by the way, has contributed $10,000, so we're up at $35,000. There's a budget you're looking at over there where we need to raise about $75,000 that we feel to do the work of this body in the next fiscal year coming up. There's a proposed schedule of fees, let's say, for the folks that are participating in it. I just want to say quickly, Ned and Christine and Lucinda and I worked, pretty hard to come up with this plan. The executive committee worked on it diligently. This is just kind of a stopgap to get us through next year. We're going to, as the executive committee, take this on as a more of an association type of fee structure. We don't know what it's going to look like, but we're going to work diligently on that. But in order for us to continue the work that we're doing, we're going to have to raise $75,000. So what I'm asking everybody to do here is, it's not an action item at the moment, but it's just looking for a consensus that if everybody kind of agrees to this, that they would have to go back to their individual bodies and try to raise some capital, and we'll kind of build this over the course of the next couple of months. But I'm going to open it up for discussion. Ned, I think you're on here somewhere. There you are, upper right-hand corner. Did I surmise this or capture this pretty closely?
I believe so.
Thank you. So any thoughts or comments on what's in the package? If anybody wants to write a $75,000 check, we'll be more than happy to take it. So if nobody's in opposition of this structure, we're going to move this forward. We'll direct staff to start moving the. Oh, we've got a hand raised from Brandon.
Chime in that I still have, some concerns about asking nonprofit housing providers to contribute much, if anything. I think that, their resources really need to be there providing housing for people. So I'm not going to die on a hill on it, but I think if there's a way to sort of reduce what may be being asked of them, helpful. But I also know this organization is doing a lot of work for a lot of localities, and I think it's worth the localities contributing and continuing to contribute. But I do worry about nonprofit housing providers.
Thank you, Brandon. It was duly noted. It was difficult for us to come up with this, and my hope is that this is a living budget, and as we go over this over time, maybe some other entities might be able to contribute a little bit more money to help relieve the burden off of the nonprofits. But we have to start somewhere, and that's what this proposal is a basis by which we can start from. Got somebody else chimed in, I missed.
This is Margaret. I know somebody else is talking too, but so what's the time frame on this that you would need, that we're going to approve it and then we're supposed to write checks? Just curious. Asking
Christine,
for a friend.
Got it. Christine, would you like to tackle that on the process?
Well, I'll take a swing at it.
Okay.
Christine, you were muted there, so we couldn't hear you, so that was easy. I cut you off without cutting you off. There are several jurisdictions here that this money's not been approved from their vote, so they have to go back and get approval. There are the nonprofits would have their boards. The for-profits have to go to their decision makers. So everybody has to go back and ask somebody for this money. And then that is contingent on us, who are the representatives of those bodies, to go back and go, here's the value we get for that money. So this is an over and beyond ask for jurisdictions, because jurisdictions are already paying into the TJPDC. And now this is an additional ask specific to this committee. So none of this is a guarantee. We are simply, we had to throw something against the wall to get a structure in place that we think is reasonable and fair. And then we have to go back and see what happens. It's very possible some of the jurisdictions could say yes, some could say no. And then we'll have to come back to the drawing board and go, here's how much we have, here's what commitments we have. We've got some verbal commitments and some already. We're outside of the budget process, I know, for Albemarle County. So I mean, this has got some trickiness to it, if you would. I think everybody agrees, though, that the partnership is worth it and we want to see it continue, but it can't be done without the resources. So if nobody's in objection to going to these different parties and starting to see what we can do, we just have to get through it this first round. And then I know that the executive committee had discussed during the strategic planning, we can start talking about how funds and what is the proper piece for funds coming in from different organizations. And this is likely to change by next year, next time we do this. But you have to start somewhere. And this is the game plan. I hope that helped, Christine. If there's anything you want to throw in on top of that.
The only thing I would add is that the commission already approved the 25,000 for FY22. So that's the funding that we'll be using in the meantime. So the urgency is there only because we need to, as staff, be able to program out the year and how much staff time to commit to this. But we have funding in the short term for us to continue exactly as we are.
So the short answer is the executive team is going to get on this pretty quickly because we can start asking the individual bodies here to start running it up their chain of command to see what they can or can't do. And we'll report back into the full body in September, and we'll have a better picture of it at that point, and the executive committee will be tackling this on a monthly basis.
Hey, Keith, I think one thing that we do need to keep in mind is, unlike Charlottesville and Albemarle County, where a lot of this effort has gone forth, I'm not saying that the rural counties haven't, done something, but Albemarle County and Charlottesville are so much more ahead. And the staffing of this group, that the work that goes into it, the planning commissions of the different divisions already have a lot of work on top of them and what it requires and what this body has taken care of. I think, when we go to advocate for these funds, not to take away from any other organization, profit or not for profit, that, the localities on its own don't necessarily have all of that information, the budgeting to hire all of the individuals and do all of the work that has already been done, on their behalf. So it's going to be important that, we be able to advocate and sell that portion of it without trying to overstep any of the other organizations for profit and nonprofit that have done great work as well. So, I don't know what that entails from the different planning bodies to assist. But I think we just have to highlight that what we have gotten out of this team of people and this group of folks, I don't even think we can put an actual number on that. So, I know everybody's asking for money, but we have to run our communities and we have to make it livable for everybody. So that's going to cost something. So that I just think that's important, that we make sure that we appreciate all people who have put in the efforts, and we're not sliding from anything, but some organizations have some more access to things than others. And those kinds of things cost. So I'll be trying to advocate on my end. I'm not really aware of the other rural communities and what they're looking like in this process.
Well, I'm in there with you. So me and you will tackle Fulton County together. So well said. Thank you very much. And anybody else would like to add or further comments to it?
Yeah, this is Sunshine. I just want to piggyback a little bit on what Brandon had said. And it was just as a nonprofit, even though obviously the majority of our funds are almost exclusively focused on the mission, we are accustomed to participating financially with various bodies that advocate around affordable housing in general. And so I did do a quick look to see how it compares, the $1,000 that's currently suggested, how it compares to what we would be participating in either at the state or federal level. And it does occur as a bit high for, so on the national level, as a member of the National Low Income Housing Coalition, which they're leveraging literally hundreds of millions of dollars nationwide, it's a $1,500 a year membership. For the Virginia Housing Alliance, which is an advocacy organization at the state level, it's they had tremendous impact in terms of the State Housing Trust Fund and a lot of other factors this last year. So we see that direct real impact in terms of our work. That membership for a nonprofit is $800 a year. So given this, the kind of drop down in scale of a regional partnership and like this, I would say that I would, at a first blush, I'd be more comfortable with something closer to say 500 or 600 relative to the fees that we pay for other sorts of similar bodies at different scales.
Thank you, Sunshine, for sharing. We didn't have a lot of reference to go by, so thank you for sharing that with us. And I just see this as a living budget. It may be tweaked a little bit, but we've got to start somewhere. Thank you, Sunshine. Again, it's not an action item. It's just trying to open up for discussion and get consensus on that. Any other thoughts, folks? Comments? All righty. So thank you for that. Thank you, Sunshine, for sharing. That was a good piece of information. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this back to the executive committee, take this information, staff, and we'll just start moving this ball forward. The reality of it is we have, because our fiscal year is going to end in a few days, so we do have $25,000 to at least keep it going, and we will bring this back to you guys as we move the process along. Christina, is that an acceptable path to you? Okay. All righty, guys. So I'm just going to double check my agenda to make sure I didn't skip anything over since we've been bouncing around a little bit. And I think, unless Christina, Lucinda, I think we're on the round table. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. So in your package, we tried something a little bit different today. What we tried to do, I think we did at the last meeting, is we kind of pre-asked the question to try to kick this off. Just a note, this is for members only, right? For RHP committee members only. So all the folks that are on that, we can save your comments or thoughts on what our discussion is for the second public comment section on it. But we basically had two questions, and you don't have to follow them, but if you would, this would be helpful. The first question is, what's the top 3 affordable housing issues your organizations has seen in the last 12 months? And then the second thing is, what do you expect to see coming up in what's your top 3 in the next 12 months? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at my screen here, see if I can keep everybody in order. And Mr. Bremmett, you happen to be next to me at the moment, to my right. So Christopher, if you wouldn't mind chiming in and kind of see how those first 2 questions feel about it, or whatever you would like to share.
I contribute from the private sector. My company is a custom home builder. We have volunteered to contribute to the land trust. We wrapped up a project with them last year and the year before. I think the most significant challenge that we see in terms of perpetuating affordable housing was summed up in a webinar that we participated in yesterday. And that's that 2021 production estimates were ramped up from an estimated 1.3 million units. And this is not just affordable. I mean, just aggregate new construction estimates from an original projection for the year of 1.3 million to 1.7 million. That's an increase of 400,000 housing units projected up. The economists in this webinar estimated that an additional 400,000 jobs would be necessary in our industry to produce, to keep up with that demand. And to date, they estimate we've created 40,000 jobs. So we're about 10% in. I think that underscores the silliness in terms of bringing housing to the market. So while I don't contribute in large part to the stock of affordable housing in our community, those are the headwinds that I think we as a regional housing partnership will all face in trying to get there.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm going to go to Sunshine next because he needs to jump off in a few minutes. But before I do, the lumber costs are probably going to impacting what you do and the potential affordable housing, do you see any relief of that coming up anytime soon?
Is that a follow-up for me or for Sunshine?
I apologize for you, Christopher.
We're optimistic with what we're seeing on the futures charts and the commodities charts, but the reality is that that portion of the lumber which is falling right now on those charts is not. It's not a majority of the lumber that goes into the house. You've got stuff with resin in it continuing to climb, and it's going to take months before this plays its way through. Orders already placed, shipments, in local inventories, if you can think of it that way. All these materials are on trucks and in mills and coming out of the other end of mills, but it's going to take a while for that to dilute into the homes that we build. The bigger challenge that I have and some of the strange conversations that I continue to have with my clients is that, because my phone has been ringing since lumber is coming down, is that everything else is still going up. And as much as lumber is a commodity, the rest of the goods are not. So metal, pipe, gypsum, windows, and it's not just happening every once in a while. It's happening almost monthly now. So it's silly, and we need jobs. And it's not just the people that work in my building here or in the field swinging hammers. I mean, it's manufacturing, everything. It's pervasive. Demand is phenomenal.
Thank you, Christopher. Sunshine, I'm going to go to you. Do I need to repeat the questions of you got?
No, it's good. I'll just segue off of what Christopher just shared there, which is I was actually on a call this morning with nonprofit affordable housing leaders across the southern region of the country this morning, and a similar question was put to everybody, and the downside is the short to medium term, which is building on what Chris said. It's not just individual material costs, it's also supply chain and timing. We're seeing, months and month delays on some materials where normally it might be weeks. And the costs are like nothing ever seen before in terms of just continued increases. And projects are seeing, and not only is it just about the raw amount of dollars, it's also about, as Christopher was just pointing out, the dynamism of the market, so that you don't have banks being willing to kind of finalize their final numbers until the last couple of weeks before closing dates, because the volatility is so intense. So it's really hard to do any sort of building, affordable housing in particular. So that's, and then Christopher also highlighted the labor market as well. It is all bound together right now in some pretty dire circumstances, to be fully candid. The sort of silver lining on the flip side, what we're looking forward to is there is a potential avalanche of funding coming down the pipeline from the feds, focused on housing and related services. The CARES Act, there's still some lingering funds coming from that down the pipeline. And then ARPA, the American Recovery Plan Act, has enormous amounts of funding coming, which is phenomenal. But the reality is that we still don't have any details on it. We know the basics, but every housing finance agency across the country, Virginia included, they, just like Christine pointed out a little while ago, we're still waiting on federal guidelines for how the money can actually be spent. And so those guidelines aren't due until end of summer, early fall at best, assuming they can fill their backlog. And then once they receive them, then oftentimes the jurisdictions, the state in particular, has to then develop a plan and get approval from the feds that a plan follows the guidelines. So realistically, we're not going to actually start seeing the taps open until end of calendar year to maybe early next year. So I think everyone remains optimistic that we're going to see a really powerful surge in funding, which is hopefully going to catalyze significant impact. But it's a little hard. It's hard to plan that far out. as well. So we're kind of waiting with bated breath. So it's a mixture of sort of dire times, but also opportunity on the horizon.
Sunshine, I know you probably can't answer this in detail, but I think you're probably the expert on this panel, on this committee. Is any of this federal money going to be used for educational purposes to help skilled labor, in other words, vocational training, or is it going to go strictly to funding projects? Do you have any information on that?
I don't have direct information on that. I will say that one of the clear gaps between now and implementation of this funding is capacity building all along the chain. That includes capacity building within the state itself to actually administer these funds, and then every step along the sequence. So how that relates to actual job creation and job training, I'm not sure, but capacity building, absolutely.
Well, my hope is it's in there because that's desperately needed. I think skilled labor is almost on par as a material cost. Anything else to add, Sunshine, on that, or that wraps you up? So, Mr. Payne, you are above Mr. Mathon, and I know that Lloyd is on. So, if you don't mind, if it's okay with you, Michael, I'll let you chime in, and then if Lloyd wants to piggyback off of that, that would be fine. So, Michael, you are up, sir.
Trying to be quick. I mean, I'm sure like everywhere, one of the major challenges the past year has been eviction prevention, emergency rental relief, and trying to meet emergency needs created by the pandemic and the economic shock that created, which also created the challenge of funding and capacity within the city, both because we had to divert money to these emergency needs and our revenues cratered. And so while we've adopted an affordable housing plan, it's been a major challenge to figure out how we're going to get the revenue to fund that long term, and as well as ensure we actually have the staff positions that are capable of executing that plan. And, quite frankly, we just haven't been there the past year to make that a realistic possibility. So over the next year, that's a huge priority. It's just getting that capacity to a place where we can implement it. With the eviction moratoriums ending at the end of that month, that will continue to be a huge priority, figuring out how we can use ARPA money as well as perhaps other sources to provide some assistance there, as well as figuring out how can we shift our funding and affordable housing back to more proactive expenditures to do new construction of affordable housing as opposed to purely meeting emergency needs. And if that's possible, to use some of the ARPA money to help us get back to a place where we're being more proactive there. And then finally, land use and zoning update this coming year is going to be huge. We've had the draft land use map, but where the rubber is really going to hit the road is when we actually start to update our zoning. And I think there's a question of whether as a city government and as a community, we're actually going to put our money where our mouth is and actually make some of those zoning changes that haven't happened for a while for a variety of reasons. But now is the time over this next year where I think we could actually do something big there.
Well, I'll say this openly. I think you guys in Charlottesville, and you in particular, Lloyd, and your fellow council members are taking the lead on some of this progressive housing and land use. So thank you very much for doing all that hard work. Lloyd, would you like to chime in on anything that Michael said or share something from your perspective?
Well, the issue that's getting the most public attention right now is the land use map and the proposal for what we're calling soft density increases, duplexes, triplexes, things like that, the so-called missing middle. We are finding that an awful lot of our very good liberal friends are a little bit horrified to learn that we might be proposing to have an apartment building in their backyards. And so there's some interesting tensions that are manifesting themselves at the moment. And they will continue to manifest themselves throughout the rest of the year as we work on the comp plan and then into next year when the zoning ordinance comes out. So lots of interesting stuff. And as I keep telling people, this is only a draft of a report from a consultant. It has not been approved by the Planning Commission. It has not been approved by City Council. And there are lots of arguments to be had, so stay tuned.
It's a long, winding road forward, to quote the Beatles. Thank you, Lloyd. Let's see, who's next? Peter, you're below Lloyd. Can you chime in and share what's going on in your world and some positives and negatives?
Sure. I'll just sort of speak more from, I guess, the mortgage market side of things. As I'm sure everyone's seen, our issue that we're seeing now in terms of housing is obviously the lack of supply and the impact on pricing. It's at a level we've never really seen before. Positive notes, requests, at least, from our own members, requests for assistance for COVID-19 impacts, that sort of thing. Forbearance modifications have vastly improved from where we were at this point last year, so we're very happy to see that. What we're keeping our eye on is a lot of the programs that were passed for us and part of the CARES Act and other guidance from our regulatory bodies. Those are set to sunset at various points. That provided a lot of freedom for not only us, but other financial institutions to provide assistance to affected borrowers, and adjusting to that when those kind of conditions sunset. So still a very dynamic environment for us. Still taking it month by month.
Thank you, Peter. Brandon, you are to the left of Peter. Would you mind sharing with us, please?
Sure thing. I don't know if I have 3 from each category or not, but Sunshine and Michael kind of hit up some of the things we were working on. But I think in terms of the public housing redevelopment and creating additional affordable housing, we've been doing a pretty good job. This is my son. Of staying on task. We've got renovation of Crescent Halls, which challenge-wise may wind up costing a whole lot more than anybody had even imagined even a few days ago. So, and some of that is related to the supply issues, not just the cost, but getting supplies in when you need them on your schedule. So some of that, and similar for phase 1 at South First Street. So some of that, the teams can work on sort of creative ways to keep work moving while they're waiting on things. But that's also made it difficult relating to neighborhood development services in the city. So we've had a number of those challenges throughout, not just related to supply issues, but related to even small things. And we are still have a challenge relationship with the planning department at the city, and that I think we're trying to work on that, but it definitely remains a work in progress. I think capacity for housing authority and every other partner is pretty low, and that's made for a lot of difficulties. It's also been difficult. Some of this is money related, some of this is pandemic related, some of this is capacity related, but the things that are going to be truly transformational about public housing redevelopment and affordable housing development in terms of services and programming, Section 3 employment opportunities. We've had challenges staying on task with that stuff. So, it's my hope that we can all dig in on that and not let these truly transformational things that are going to help the community fall by the wayside. But we all need resources to do that and capacity. Land use is something that we've all been working on. I think it was accurately described by Michael and Lloyd. There's some turmoil out there. I really feel like part of this is the leadership in the city hasn't really gone to those communities and sold the idea of rolling back segregation and really presenting that as a positive to the community. So now there's just a real tension there and conflict that I think we all need to get through. And honestly, myself and some other advocates aren't necessarily the people to sell that to those neighborhoods. It needs to be other voices chiming in and letting them know that that's a benefit for the entire community if we can provide more affordable housing and change our zoning to make that more possible and roll back segregation. I wanted to just hint in terms of opportunity. I know it's a little further down the road, but the infrastructure package that the Congress is looking at, we have some hopes that there will be job training opportunities through that. I know we met with Senator Kane. He mentioned something really simple, which was being able to use Pell Grants for people to do short-term training programs, you know, intensive 8-week or so technical training, so that folks can pay for that training. I think that could be a big help in a number of ways. But we're really looking at how we can get Section 3 to really pop. Right now, it's just a rule, and we need funding for programming to make that work. And we also anticipate that may make some big changes in public housing in terms of funding for their capital fund, providing more vouchers, as well as there is an attempt to roll back the Faircloth Amendment, which is the rule they passed in the late 90s that puts a cap on public housing. You can't build any more public housing through the public housing funding stream. So there is an attempt to change that and may provide additional subsidy, which could be a big game changer for localities, and particularly our locality, to pump in some more money into our efforts. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you, Brendan. Appreciate sharing. So Greg, you're next to Brandon. Just a little bit of time clock noting. I'd like to make sure we leave enough time for public comment. So we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left before we hit that portion of the agenda. So Greg.
I think the real opportunity this year will be in the city, hopefully getting through the comprehensive plan and into rezoning. The uncertainties have basically frozen any development in the city, I would say, for 4 years with the uncertainties. And the downward pressure from shortage of housing at all levels is really, really impacting affordable housing. The simple things like the site plan approval process is still broken, but the new city manager, I am very optimistic, is focused on bringing in a new layer of management that can start addressing those things to make the process simpler. And then once the rezoning starts to more clearly define the future going forward and what the city will look like, I think that we will see activity in the city. Just interestingly, I went from 100% of my work in the city to 4 years ago having 0% except for by right affordable like Habitat. And I'm now out in the rural counties doing the bigger affordable apartment and single family and duplex, which I think is encouraging. And it also, I think the Regional Housing Partnership has really helped with that. So I am encouraged by the coming year. The issues last year were COVID, costs, and the city, and I think all three seem to be clearing up.
Thanks, Greg. I can add and echo that the surrounding jurisdictions, there seems to be moving forward on some affordable housing projects. So thank you for all the hard work that you're doing on that. So Margaret, you're up next, if you don't mind. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, I was hoping you guys would run out of time before you got to me. In terms of like the first question that you were talking about, I mean, I'm such a newbie in this whole world that what I've been trying to do is just build the boxes in my brain to put all of the information that you've been giving me this whole time. But out here in the country, we are experiencing like more homelessness than we've ever had. I mean, people calling us daily about looking for a place to live or living in a shed or something like that. So, and I think that's all, it is somewhat pandemic related. But I also think that it's people who are saying, I need help, where, you know, they could double up or they were happy doubling up or they think that we can help. And so one of our priorities for the upcoming year is to do some capacity building here at my organization so that we can help more. Also developing the relationships with the governments, local governments that have been like the way they've always been for years and years and years. And I'm trying to like get them to recognize us as like more of a player in this party, and so that we can address some of the things that have just been really not even maybe even viewed as an issue out here in the rural community. Also, we are feeling super tons of pressure around not having any housing at all, affordable or otherwise. There's nothing to rent, absolutely nothing out there. There's nothing to buy except for land, and we're talking $16,000 an acre, minimum. So it's a big strain for young families and retiring families here. And so I just hope we can work together with all of this funding that's coming up to try to address some of that here in the county.
Thank you, Margaret. Diantha, you were next to Margaret.
Hey, just, well, and I don't have the questions in front of me. I'll just give you some random comments and then Ned can add, okay? We certainly, Albemarle County received a draft of our affordable housing policy and did not approve it at the last meeting, sent it back to Stacy. I had some concerns. I think the supervisors had concerns that the incentives for the developers were not clearly laid out. And I'll just leave it at that for right now. Of course, we have a tight market. What I can speak to in certainly my world in the urban ring, I am seeing, because the market is so tight and houses aren't staying on the market, I am seeing some of the rental houses that were scooped up during the last recession and were rental units and people were able to take advantage of them are now going on the market. And I'm losing some of that affordable housing. Just a comment. And I mean, you guys are in that world and I'm not a real estate person or anything, but it is a little frustrating for me because they're being swooped up and I'm afraid I'm going to lose the few affordable houses in the neighborhoods that I have. And I guess, I do want to make this comment, and this is kind of off base, but I kind of do that anyway. I met with 2 or 3 people over the last couple of weeks that should have known about Porchlight VA and had no idea that it existed. So I don't know if there's a way we can get that advertised better or not, but that's just a random, when legal aid doesn't know, that's not a good thing. So just saying that hopefully we can get that word out, and then I'll just let Ned take it from there on what he might have.
Thank you for sharing, Diantha. I can see Christine taking copious notes there, so I'm sure she'll reach out to the folks. So everybody, we're going to run a little over 3:30 because I want to give everybody an opportunity to speak. I hope that's okay for everybody. And thank you for everybody's patience waiting for us to get on the quorum. It is no secret that I am a huge fan of the missing middle and adopting that. And Diantha, you shared something that is not talked about very often, which is these rental units are now going to sales. This is the space I'm in. And every time that happens, it makes affordable housing even that much harder. So thank you for sharing. Anthony, you are up next, sir.
All right, hey everybody. So it's been an interesting time of new challenges and also new opportunities, like a lot of people have said. There are a lot of new opportunities through funding to address homelessness, and still more coming down the line, which is pretty incredible. And yet also we are faced, like everybody said, with probably the tightest housing, affordable housing market we've ever experienced, or at least I have in town. So helping people get out of homelessness and into housing is ironically harder than ever, even though we have more money to do it than ever before. And it's not because we lack the rental assistance available to do it. So that's just a really unique situation for us to be in. It does clearly show that the constricting factor is the market, basically the actual available units, and in addition to units that people are eligible for. So that also continues to be quite a barrier, is landlords asking for 3 times someone's income in rent. There's still confusion, I think, about the source of income protection out there in the community and what that means for someone with rental assistance or a housing choice voucher. So those issues are really kind of, coming to the surface in this tight market and trying to help people find housing. Those, eligibility concerns are still quite large. And yet, there was emergency housing vouchers that were just announced. Actually, I'm working with Margaret on that for Nelson County. So hopefully we can address those new homelessness concerns that she's seeing. Region 10 also got emergency housing vouchers, and CRHA also got emergency housing vouchers to address homelessness specifically, which is fantastic. And yet that's another example of it's still hard to find a place to use those vouchers. So it's kind of an interesting just time where we have new resources that we didn't have previously, and yet it's also difficult to really see how to use those. The Premier Circle project has been going well, and folks are, there's new units that are open, and people are still moving into those through after renovation's been completed there at the site. So that continues to move forward. Funding from the state has also, recent funding from the state has also helped to, helped with operations over there at Premier Circle. So, new opportunities, new challenges, which has been pretty amazing. Also in this place of hard to find housing. So I will say that we are, real quick, and then I'll end. We have we're an all-time low number of homeless veterans experiencing homelessness in our area, which is really exciting. And actually we're at the precipice of being able to declare a functional end of homelessness, which I really struggle with saying that. It's really a technical term about the number, but it's hovering at 5 to 6 veterans experiencing homelessness, where previously we've always hovered around 15 to 20. So that is a real significant shift in our system of care, which is fantastic. So our goal is to get down to 3 and keep it there, 3 or lower. That's our goal. And I think we're definitely going to make it there before September. So hopefully next time I update everybody, we've made it there.
So as a combat wounded vet, thanks for all the hard work you're doing for that. It's a great number, but I understand the intrepidness on it. So thank you very much for all the hard work you do. So I think, unless I missed it, Ned, you are our last person, unless I missed somebody.
I'll go quick. I mean, I think we all know what the challenges and big things are, because everybody works on this issue on a day in, day out basis. And Albemarle's plan is in that housing policy of how to start getting at it. That's our game plan. The incentive piece that Supervisor McKeel mentioned, I think we're going to be able to work that out in quick order. In fact, that should be coming back to us at our next meeting. If it doesn't have the actual incentives defined, it'll have some or a game plan out there. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. Stacy can correct that. But the idea is to get Stacy to work putting that plan into action. We've spent a lot of time getting the right plan in place. We're so close. Once we get that approved, then that is how Albemarle is going to attack affordable housing in our county. I think the big things in the future, on the horizon, Supervisor McKeel has been at the forefront of talking about transit and having functional transit in our community. And once we have affordable housing up and running and places put into place, and specifically in the county, then we need to be able to provide the support services there so that those affordable units, while they work and are affordable for the people living in them, it needs to be a realistically functional thing for them, meaning they need to be able to get to jobs, workplaces, and other things from where they live. And that's going to be a big challenge as well for the county as we start approving land use applications and other things, even in our urban ring, where everyone you almost assume that the services are there, but they're not. At least not to make it functional for somebody that has to go to work every day. So that's a big one that's going to come right on the heels of putting affordable units into place. And we know that, so we just have to get that plan in place and make sure that we attack that as well. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Ned. You know, as everybody was speaking, you know, we have some awesome stuff on the agenda, but I love these roundtables. I never walk away from one of these not being a little bit smarter. And most people who know me knows it doesn't take much for me to get a little bit smarter, but awesome notes. Thank you for everybody participating in this. I'm looking forward to our future roundtables. Before I get into the second public comments, I'd like to ask staff, would staff like to share anything, or Smith, shut up and let's move on?
No, I think the executive director's report covered the initiatives that we're working on. I do want to make one quick comment. I'm sorry I didn't bring this up in the agenda setting meeting, but just in looking at the agenda, I noticed that our last meeting of the year falls on December 22nd, which feels awfully close to the holidays. So if okay with you all, I'm going to go ahead and bump that up to the second Wednesday instead of the fourth Wednesday, and send out a calendar invite to change that on our calendar so that we're not backing up to the holidays.
Well, I was going to talk to you about that after this meeting because I will not be in town on the 22nd, like most of us. So thank you. And any other staff want to chime in before we move on? No, thank you. So
can I add one thing, Keith? I promise this will be really fast.
Sure.
I'm so grateful and appreciative of the comments on what staff has been doing, but I also want to make sure that the kudos goes back to this body. The committees, this partnership in general, we all know is so very valuable to this region, but the time commitment that's being put in by the executive committee, the strategies and analysis team creating that regional housing plan, the events committee putting on monthly events. I mean, I'm just really grateful for the communal aspect. Like, yes, staff is working really hard, but so are all of you all. And so thank you for what you guys are putting towards all of this stuff that we're working on.
Here, here, cheers. Thank you very much. So that being said, we were going into our second public comment. I know Matt's been patiently waiting. If you can keep it till around 3 minutes, Matt, I'd appreciate it, but we'll give you a little latitude since you've been so patient.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Lawless, and I represent the town of Scottsville as town administrator. Our town council so appreciates the service of this body in partnership with our local work. It benefits the town here very visibly. I sincerely apologize if I missed earlier opportunities to be helpful to you. I commend you for the good planning and strong action obvious in your regional housing plan. As a very junior partner in this work, Scottsville is with you. My comment is that the plan discussed today doesn't adequately represent the towns of Scottsville, Standardsville, Louisa, and Mineral as active partners. Our populations are small, but we have walkable density, independent zoning authority, taxing power, and the ability to assemble effective community partnerships. We can help. Here in Scottsville, we have a much appreciated community under Piedmont Housing Alliance management. Albemarle's housing policy updates, just mentioned, do include Scottsville in several valuable ways. But just this past Monday, Town Council rezoned 19 acres for missing middle density, plus zoning text amendments to incentivize that. On your board, I've met with many of you about renovation and construction partnerships here in town. So if you're doing presentations to governing bodies in the region as you roll out your plan, please consider including the several town councils. It seems important and helpful to motivate us to help you in your goals. In terms of the budget that you mentioned, Scottsville would be very willing to contribute to your planning expenses. My population share relative to Albemarle on your line items would be about $60, but I'd gladly go higher than that for the good of the group. A few minor edits to the plan to include the 4 towns would help us mobilize our efforts and connect to grant funding like community development block grants, which we are eligible applicants for, and connecting to the regional plans helps to justify that and help us do good work. I think my colleagues in Standardsville, Louisa, and Mineral would likely have similar ideas and concerns. So please let us know how we can help, and count me in as a partner in Scottsville. Thank you.
Matt, you're a rock star. Thank you for kicking off the funding drive, let's call it. So thank you very much for doing that. I saw Christine taking copious notes, so I can tell you it was not intentional by any stretch of the imagination. This was just a Herculean task, but I would be in support 100% of bringing in the towns. It makes all the sense in the world. So Christine will probably reach out to you and see what we can do to grow. All our meetings are open, as you well as open to the public, executive committees, the plan committees, et cetera. So I would encourage you and your fellow town council folks or any other town jurisdictions to join our meetings and contribute. Thank you, Matt. Anybody else that's on the public that would like to chime in and say something? All right. Hearing none, I apologize. We went a little over. I do try to pride myself to finish these meetings on time, but we were struggling a little bit in the beginning to get our flow going. So our next meeting, I'll leave the December conversation off, but our next meeting as a full group is the 22nd. I'm happy to say that 99.999% sure that will be in person. I cannot wait to have that happen and see all your smiley faces and just have a great open dialogue. So unless anybody has any objections to me adjourning 10 minutes over, I am going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much, folks. And Christine and Lucinda, would you mind staying on for a minute or two, please?
Thanks, guys.
everybody.
Bye-bye. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Ned. Thanks, Matt.
Nice job, Keith.
Thanks, buddy. You're welcome to stay on if you want, but it just got a couple of things I'd like to chat with Christine about the Virginia governor's housing conference.
If you need me to, I can for a few minutes. Otherwise, I'm going to go jump in it.
No, if it's okay with you, I think we got it.
Awesome. You got it. Thanks. Good job
Thanks,
again.
buddy.
I am still here, but I'm going to step away because I need
That's
to
okay.
stretch my legs before my 4 o'clock meeting.